God, extend our hearts so we may feel you more keenly. Extend our minds that we may know you more deeply. Extend our eyes that we may see you more clearly. Extend our ears that we may hear you more nearly. Amen. When I was a child, I knew a girl, about 4 years old. She was vibrant and full of life. We were inseparable and did everything together. When I woke up, she was there. When I went to sleep, she was there. We drove to school together. We were picked up together. When I think of my early childhood, I just remember her being there. We would come to rely on each other in ways that most do not at that age, and I thought less in terms of I can do this and more in terms of we can do this. But just as fast as this time seemed to go by, she was gone. She would be a part of me from then on, but I would not be the same. It was like starting over at age 4. I was learning loop-de-loop and pull, and a wave had washed over what I had known. Today is New Year's Eve, and the Gospel of Genesis is fitting in its talks of beginnings. In the beginning can be any day with Christ, but New Year's is a time our culture seems to collectively acknowledge it's okay to hit reset. Sometimes starting new is by choice, and sometimes it's thrust upon you. There are times that we have the luxury of preparation and times that our bodies are forced to react immediately and without warning. As the years went on, there was a part of me that felt missing, and I would try and recreate her in different relationships. My feelings felt deeper at an earlier age, my thoughts weightier, everything sort of became pronounced, as if I could just make enough noise, call out loud enough that she would return, and I would be whole again. What is happening in your life that you're making noise about? And are there things that you're not making enough noise about? Maybe something wonderful has happened, and when you share, you feel like no one's reacting to it the way you had hoped. Maybe you need help with something but are too afraid to ask. Or maybe you're someone who's seen as having it all together, and when you do ask, people don't take it as seriously. And then there are those times where we aren't being noisy enough. Maybe you're not saying how you feel because you're afraid of rejection. Or maybe things are going really well, but everyone around you isn't, and you just want to stop, call God, and thank Him for your blessings. I draw these scenarios out not just because life is short, so YOLO, but because God didn't create us to sit in our seats, quietly observing the show. He created us to be the main character in our narrative, not to have the illusion that we are in control of it all, but that in striving for it, in vulnerable I am sorries, in bold I'm in love with yous, we are not simply waiting for heaven, but we are bringing a little heaven to us while we're here on earth. But in order to truly do this, in order to see the lovely, we must be able to coexist with the scary. We must resist emotional suppression and faking it until we make it, and embrace vulnerability. And this means bringing along your heartbreak, not thwarting it off with a giant sword. It means keeping a space in your mind for your failures and your successes, your sadness and your happiness, and recognizing that both are vital. As the years went by growing up, I eventually stopped making so much noise and relinquished the power I tried to exert over the situation into blunt reality. I spent time, money, and energy trying to vanquish this part of me by making it not so. You are still whole. You must let it go, I told myself. But eventually I acknowledged the simple reality that this was a formative experience that I could not undo or fix. There are some you can when you are older. This was not the case. And no effort I made, though I tried, would change that. So I embraced this part of my story. I lived through it. I let it shine through me. instead of allowing it to darken me up. And I am actually more of an interesting person because of it. I feel I would be boring without it. By allowing that to take place, you decrease its power to affect you negatively. And the irony is that by giving up control, you actually become more in control. As I come to the end of my message, to illustrate this, I want to do an exercise. I want you to take a moment and make up a character, as if you're making a movie. Think of their build, their color eyes, think of their hair, their everyday outfit. Do you have it in your mind? Now, for the next 20 seconds, do not think about this character. Think about anything else except this. And we'll begin now. Okay, how did it go? If you're like most people, you thought of what you were trying not to think of within seconds. This is what's known in psychology as the purple elephant paradox. I'm sure there's a more professional term, but that's what I found. The idea is that our minds are made to think. That's literally what they are doing, and by trying to conquer the thoughts and control them, by pushing them away, we actually end up suppressing ourselves. And this is because it takes so much energy to do that, which is ultimately an effort in futility. So our brains simply need to learn to view every uncomfortable experience as very bad. This is what happens, and needing to be done away with it as soon as possible. And meanwhile, our brains, which are not equipped to do this, feel less and almost separate from reality. Being vulnerable is not easy. Being real is not easy. When we share our deepest thoughts and longings with someone, we are letting them in, not knowing how we will be perceived or received. I would go as far as to say it's risky. When I was in 8th grade and was going out with my girlfriend, it took months just to tell each other that we liked each other in typical middle school fashion. And the night I finally decided I was going to kiss her as my first kiss, we were watching the movie La Boheme, and I honestly can't tell you anything about that movie because I spent hours in constant anxiety about should I kiss her now and how do I do it and what if she doesn't receive it well. And I just sort of got it in my head that I was going to do it that night, and if I didn't get it in, that I would fail myself. So eventually I summoned the courage within minutes of my dad at the end of the night saying time to go, and an awkward millisecond kiss in her bathroom with her parents right outside ensued. Now, if I were to talk to myself back then, I would say, would you just do it? Think about how much time you're wasting and the other people you might be missing out by prolonging this ambiguous connection. We waste a lot of time avoiding discomfort and rejection that we often feel better living in uncertainty. But it's better to know you're walking on glass than always walking on eggshells. And the quickest way through is to accept the risk that you may step on glass and get hurt. The comfort comes from Christ in all outcomes. God guarantees we will be okay if we are vulnerable and apply for a job but don't get it because he was vulnerable for us first on the cross. He guarantees we will be okay if we are vulnerable and decide to tell our spouse what's been bothering us and they respond with divorce because he was vulnerable for us first on the cross. He guarantees we will be okay when we are vulnerable and decide to make that change, to leave what we knew behind and start completely anew because he was vulnerable first for us on the cross. And if our God, the one with authority, the parent, the one that we call perfect and king, is vulnerable with us, we ought to try and be vulnerable with him. Because with God, there is no risk. He already loves us. Amen.